The craziest thing about 1968 is that the biggest movies were bold and weird and changing cinema forever, while the old guard was lighting piles of cash on fire. Think about it. The same year that 2001 A Space Odyssey blew minds and Planet of the Apes shocked audiences, studios were still throwing millions at bloated musicals and prestige vanity projects that nobody under 30 wanted to see. That gap, right there, that is where the disasters happened. This was not just bad luck, it was denial. Hollywood refused to admit the party was over and paid for it in full. Let us count down the carnage. On paper, this looked untouchable. Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, Tennessee Williams source material, exotic island setting, big dramatic energy. It should have been prestige gold. Instead, it was a glossy fever dream that left audiences confused and critics laughing. The story follows a dying wealthy woman living in isolation who becomes obsessed with a mysterious poet who shows up at her villa. It is all intense stares and theatrical speeches and dramatic poses against cliffs and crashing waves. Sounds bold, right? It was, but it felt artificial, stagey, like a filmed play that forgot movies need movement. The dialogue is heavy. The mood is heavy. Everything is heavy. And here is the problem. By 1968, the audience was not buying high society melodrama delivered like a Shakespeare recital. Younger viewers wanted grit, edge, something that felt alive. Instead, they got couture gowns and tortured monologues. Financially, it was brutal. The film cost serious money and barely made a dent at the box office. Critics shredded it. Some called it self-indulgent. Others called it outright ridiculous. That word stuck, ridiculous. When a prestige drama becomes a punchline, you know you are in trouble. This was not just a flop. It was a signal. Star power alone could not save you anymore. The culture had shifted. Boom did not explode. It evaporated. Now this one hurts, because this was supposed to be a sure thing. Julie Andrews coming off massive success. Big, sweeping musical biopic about stage legend Gertrude Lawrence, lavish costumes, giant sets, classic Hollywood polish. It screamed awards season. The film tells the rise and fall of a Broadway icon. We see her ambition, her charm, her ego, her messy personal life. It is structured like a grand stage production with song after song and elaborate choreography. It looks expensive because it was expensive. Painfully expensive. But audiences were done with this style. Musicals had ruled the early 60s. By the late 60s, they felt old-fashioned, long, safe, out of touch. Meanwhile, films like Bonnie and Clyde had already ripped the door off the hinges. Energy had changed. Hollywood did not get the memo. The runtime did not help. It is long. It drags. It feels like homework instead of a night out. And when a musical feels like homework, you are finished. Financially, it was a disaster. Huge budget. Weak returns. The studio panicked and even re-released a shorter cut, hoping to salvage something. It did not work. The losses were massive, and it contributed to the near collapse of the big musical era. And this was not just a box office bomb. It was a tombstone. The classic Hollywood musical did not die quietly. It died expensively. And Star stands there like a glitter-covered reminder that timing is everything. This one is wild because it almost works. Almost. Directed by a young Francis Ford Coppola before he became the Coppola we all know. Big fantasy musical about leprechauns and racism and magic gold in the American South. Yes, that is the pitch. You can already feel the confusion. The story follows an Irish father and daughter who move to the United States with a stolen pot of gold. A leprechaun chases them. A racist senator gets magically turned into a black man. There are songs. There are dances. There is social commentary wrapped in bright stage lighting. It sounds bold. And in some ways, it was. The themes were not timid, but the tone is all over the place. 1 minute it is a whimsical fairy tale. The next it is tackling serious race issues with Broadway-style optimism. That clash never fully settles. Audiences did not know whether to laugh or lean in or roll their eyes. And again, it is a musical. In late 1968, that timing is brutal. Counterculture films were surging. Youth audiences wanted rebellion. Realism, something raw. Instead, they got shamrocks and tap dancing. The budget was high, the box office was not. It underperformed badly compared to expectations. Critics were split. Some admired the ambition. Others thought it felt dated and awkward, but split reviews do not save you when tickets are not selling. Today, some people defend it. They say it was ahead of its time, maybe. But at the time, it looked like another expensive example of Hollywood clinging to a format that was slipping through its fingers. Disney thought this was safe, wholesome, historical, musical, family-friendly. That formula had worked before, so they doubled down. The movie follows a patriotic family band in the 1880s, traveling around performing songs, while political tensions rise around them. There are cheerful numbers, clean costumes, big smiles. It feels like a live action, Saturday afternoon special stretched into a full feature. And here is the issue. It feels safe, too safe. In 1968, the real world was messy. Vietnam, civil rights struggles, protests in the streets. Young people were questioning everything. But meanwhile, Disney served up a nostalgic musical about cheerful performers waving flags. That disconnect was glaring. Kids were aging faster than studios realized. The new generation was not rushing to see this kind of sugary Americana, and older audiences were shrinking. Financially, it underperformed badly, not the biggest budget of the year, but enough to sting. It did not become the family hit Disney hoped for. It faded quickly and never became a cultural staple. This was not offensive. It was not shocking. It was just out of sync, and sometimes being out of sync is worse than being terrible, because you can fix terrible, but you cannot fix a studio that refuses to see the calendar on the wall. And 1968 was not waiting for anyone. This one thought it was slick. It thought it was hip. It thought it was riding the spy wave that exploded after James Bond. Instead, it looked like a middle-aged man trying to use teenage slang and hoping nobody would notice. The film stars Sammy Davis Jr. and Peter Lawford as nightclub owners who stumble into a murder plot tied to political conspiracy. On paper, that sounds fun. Two charismatic leads, swinging London vibes, a bit of mystery, a bit of satire. It should have worked. But here is the problem. The tone never locks in. Is it parody? Is it serious? Is it buddy comedy? Is it political thriller? The movie keeps shifting gears without warning. One moment it wants to be cool and dangerous. The next it slips into slapstick and awkward gags. That confusion kills momentum. Audiences in 1968 were not craving confused spy spoofs. And they were watching films that felt urgent and modern. The Graduate, Bonnie and Clyde, even Bullet with its car chases felt sharper and more real than this glossy caper. Salt and Pepper looked like yesterday trying to imitate today. Financially, it underperformed. It did not collapse on the level of the giant musicals, but it failed to justify its production costs and marketing push. Critics were lukewarm at best. Some praised the leads, many called it uneven and tired. And here is the truth. Being almost good is sometimes worse than being outright bad, because you can see the better version hiding inside, but it never shows up. It just stands there half-dressed and half-baked while the box office quietly walks away. Now, this is the kind of project that studios convince themselves is bold and sophisticated. A European-flavored drama about passion and excess with arthouse ambition. Serious faces, serious lighting, serious themes. You know the type. The story follows a wealthy man who drifts through decadent relationships and emotional emptiness. It leans heavily on mood, long conversations, stares across candlelit rooms. It wants to feel intellectual, deep, mature. But 1968 was not the year to be slow and self-important without delivering something gripping. The counterculture was not sitting patiently for polite European melancholy. If you were going to push boundaries, you had to really push. If you were going to go art house, you had to shock or provoke. This film mostly brooded. See, it struggled to find an audience in the United States. Marketing was unclear. Was it erotic drama? Was it prestige cinema? Was it foreign art import? When people cannot figure out what you are selling, they do not buy tickets. Financially, it failed to make an impact. Limited engagement, weak returns. It vanished quickly from theaters. Critics were divided, but division does not pay the bills. This is one of those quiet disasters. Not the loud musical meltdown, not the glamorous star vehicle crash. Just a slow fade into irrelevance. And sometimes that is even colder, because there is no dramatic fall. Just a soft thud that barely makes a sound before the next movie takes its slot. This one is complicated. It actually made money. Let me say that clearly. It was not a flop in pure ticket sales, but culturally it was a disaster, and long-term it became a symbol of how out of touch Hollywood could be. Starring John Wayne and co-directed by Wayne himself, this was a full-throated pro-Vietnam War film at the height of public anger over that very war. The story follows American special forces fighting heroically in Vietnam. It presents a clear moral line. Good versus evil. Brave soldiers versus communist threat. Simple, patriotic, direct. The problem is that 1968 was not simple. The Tet Offensive had shattered public confidence. Protests were everywhere. Young people were questioning authority in massive numbers. And here comes a glossy studio production insisting everything is under control and noble and righteous. Critics hammered it. Some called it propaganda. The others said it ignored reality. Even viewers who supported the war found it heavy-handed. It felt like a film from an earlier decade dropped into a world that had already moved on. Yes, it performed strongly at the box office, but the backlash was fierce. It damaged reputations. It became a punchline in film circles, and over time it stood as proof that Hollywood sometimes reads the room completely wrong. So while it was not a financial collapse, it was a cultural misfire of huge proportions. A reminder that success on paper does not always mean respect or longevity. Sometimes you win the weekend and lose the era. Now this is a different kind of disaster. Big historical epic. Period costumes, war spectacle, a serious attempt at prestige filmmaking. Not it wanted to be grand and important. The film retells the famous Crimean War cavalry charge. It tries to mix satire with tragedy. There are elaborate battle scenes, political commentary, a tone that shifts between irony and horror. Ambitious, no doubt, but ambition does not guarantee connection. The pacing is uneven. The satire is dry. The war scenes are intense but emotionally distant. Audiences walked in expecting a thrilling historical epic. What they got felt colder and stranger. And then there was controversy. Animal welfare issues during production created backlash. That alone cast a shadow over the release. Even viewers who might have been interested hesitated. Financially, it struggled. The budget was large for its time. The returns were not. It did not become the sweeping epic the studio hoped for. Instead, it joined the pile of expensive late 60s projects that failed to capture the changing audience mood. 1968 rewarded films that felt urgent and raw. This one felt carefully constructed and slightly removed. Not terrible, not incompetent, just misaligned with the moment. And in a year where the ground was shifting fast, being slightly off was enough to sink you. This one is chaos, pure chaos. And not the cool kind, the exhausting kind. Candy was sold as a wild psychedelic satire about innocence colliding with lust and hypocrisy. It had a stacked cast: Marlon Brando, Richard Burton, James Coburn, even Ringo Starr. That lineup alone makes you think it must have something going for it. But star power cannot fix a script that does not know what it wants to say. What the story follows a naive young woman who drifts from one absurd sexual encounter to another, while powerful men project their fantasies onto her. It tries to be a biting social commentary. It tries to mock authority. It tries to be outrageous and sexy and subversive all at once. Instead, it feels messy, disconnected, like a collection of skits stitched together without a heartbeat. And here is the key. By 1968, audiences had already seen real counterculture energy on screen. Bonnie and Clyde felt dangerous. The Graduate felt sharp. Candy felt like older filmmakers trying to imitate youth rebellion by turning the dial up to 11 and hoping shock value would cover the cracks. Critics tore it apart. They called it tasteless. They called it incoherent. They said it mistook randomness for depth. Audiences were curious at first. When the cast pulled them in, But word of mouth spread fast. Confusion is not a selling point. Financially, it failed to justify its cost. Not the biggest budget of the year, but enough to sting. It became one of those projects people reference with a sigh and a shrug. This was not bold experimentation that missed. It was a loud attempt to be relevant that landed flat. And that hurts worse because you can see the desperation underneath the glitter. This one wanted to be monumental. Epic religious drama. Big themes, big emotions, big speeches about faith and global politics. It stars Anthony Quinn as a Ukrainian archbishop, unexpectedly elected pope. That is a powerful setup. The film tackles nuclear tension between world powers. It explores whether a spiritual leader can prevent catastrophe. It is serious, earnest, sweeping. The sets are massive. The tone is solemn. Everything feels heavy with importance, but here is the uncomfortable truth. Audiences were tired of solemn prestige pictures that move at the speed of a glacier. The runtime is long. The pacing is slow. The dialogue is dense. It demands patience in a year when viewers were chasing sharper and more immediate stories. Critics were mixed. Some admired the ambition. Others found it dull and self-serious. That split reaction is deadly when you are carrying a large budget, and this film had one. Financially, it underperformed relative to its cost. It was not a total wipeout, but it did not become the towering success the studio expected. Instead, it became another example of late 60s prestige cinema struggling to compete with edgier films reshaping the market. It aimed for greatness. It reached for timeless significance. What it found was indifference. And indifference at that price is a disaster. Yes, it premiered in late 1967, but its financial disaster echoed straight into 1968 accounting books. And the fallout was brutal. This was supposed to be the next giant family musical. Huge budget. Massive sets, elaborate animal sequences, star power with Rex Harrison. The studio believed it had another Sound of Music on its hands. What it actually built was a very expensive problem. The story follows a quirky doctor who can talk to animals and sails off on grand adventures. On paper, it is charming, whimsical, perfect for families, but the execution felt bloated. The pacing drags. The songs are pleasant, but not unforgettable, and the tone sits in that awkward space between playful and painfully slow. Behind the scenes, it was chaos. Production delays, animal handling issues, budget climbing higher and higher. By the time it hit theaters, the cost was staggering. It needed to be a monster hit just to break even. It was not. Audiences showed up at first out of curiosity, but word spread quickly. It was too long, too soft, too old-fashioned. Kids fidgeted. Parents checked their watches. Critics were not kind. Some called it charming but lifeless. Others labeled it an example of Hollywood excess at its worst. Financially, it lost millions. Real money. The kind of loss that makes executives sweat through meetings. It damaged confidence in the big musical format even further. Studios began slashing budgets and rethinking strategy. Lavish family spectacles were suddenly a risk, not a guarantee. This was not just a movie that underperformed. It became a cautionary tale. Spend without restraint, and you better pray the audience is still in love with your style. By 1968, they were not. Dr. Dolittle stands at the top of this disaster list not because it was the worst film ever made, but because it symbolized the end of an era. Glittering optimism met changing times, and the times won.